We begin with today's jobs report. Robert Reich was labor secretary during the Clinton administration, and Jared Bernstein served as the chief economist to Vice President Biden. Mr. Secretary, let me start with you before we get to the politics of it. Explain to me the substance. What's going on? What does it mean in the big picture?
Essentially, Michael, job growth has stalled. It's 8.2% unemployment, same as last month. But we also see that 80,000 jobs were created in June. That's nothing to crow about. The average monthly job growth of the last 3 months has been about 75,000 jobs, a substantial decline from the job numbers that we saw in January, February, and March. Now, it's a similar slowdown to a slowdown we have seen in previous years. The hope, obviously, is that we get more job growth later in the year. That's a hope both economically and politically. But it's very hard to make good news out of today's job numbers.
Mr. Bernstein, where is it headed? I think we're all aware of the statistic that says since World War II, no president's been reelected when the unemployment rate was north of 7.4%. Is it likely that 8.2 could get under 7.4 between now and November?
Absolutely not. You never know, but that is way outside anyone's forecast. The most optimistic forecasts I've seen do have the unemployment rate trending down a bit below 8% by the end of the year. But frankly, between now and then, absent some very important and necessary economic policy to generate more job growth, which gridlock will probably block, it's hard to see things change that much.
Let's talk about the politics. This morning, Governor Romney was quick to pounce on the jobs numbers and attack the president and his policies. Take a look.
The president's policies have not gotten America working again, and the president's going to have to stand up and take responsibility for it. I know he's been planning on going across the country and celebrating what he calls forward. Well, forward doesn't look a lot like forward to the millions and millions of families that are struggling today in this great country. It doesn't have to be this way. America can do better. And this kick in the gut has got to end.
The president also mentioned the jobs numbers in his speech this morning in Poland, Ohio.
We learned this morning that our businesses created 84,000 new jobs last month. And that overall means that businesses have created 4.4 million new jobs over the past 28 months, including 500,000 new manufacturing jobs. That's a step in the right direction. That's a step in the right direction. But we can't be satisfied because our goal was never to just keep on working to get back to where we were back in 2007. I want to get back to a time when middle-class families and those working to get into the middle class have some basic security. That's our goal.
Mr. Secretary, to use a golfing metaphor, is it time for the president to put aside the 9-iron and bring out the driver? Does he need to do something more bold relative to the economy?
I think so, Michael. It's hard for the president, obviously. He is correct. He was dealt a terrible hand, the worst economy since the Great Depression. Though I think he is going to have to say something more than we are making progress. It's slow progress. I was dealt a bad hand. Now, he's got to be a bit bolder, I think.
What might that be?
Now,
what
granted,
could it be?
Well, he could say, we're going to have if I get the votes. I mean, it's obviously Republicans are not going to give him any votes. But he can say, if and when I do get the votes, we're going to have a new Works Progress Administration, a Civilian Conservation Corps. We're going to rebuild the nation's infrastructure. We're going to rebuild education. We are going to have a first-class a nation in every respect. We're going to put people back to work. We're going to fight and keep fighting for average working people. And he can come up with other things as well. Now, again, Republicans are going to say, as they have already said, we are not going to spend any more money. The president could say, what about a middle-class tax cut? What about exempting the first $20,000 of income from the Social Security payroll tax? I mean, I, President of the United States, am not going to stop making new proposals simply because the Republicans just say no.
Mr.
He
Bernstein,
can do a lot of things.
Do you agree with the secretary? Do you think that the president needs to do something more bold than he has done? I mean, you look at the polls right now, they're neck and neck. And I think that Governor Romney is coasting along along being the other guy thus far. How do you see the politics?
I agree with your analysis, and I like Bob Reich's ideas. I think that's precisely the kind of thing the president should talk about. Now, he doesn't need to introduce necessarily a bunch of new things. He can say absolutely correctly, I've got ideas that I've been trying to promote on Capitol Hill now for well over a year. And some of them are just really good common sense. For example, we know that last month we shed 14,000 jobs in local education, 23 out of the last 25 months. The public sector has shrunk. Now, you should go forward at a time like this and say, folks, these are your teachers, these are your police, these are your firefighters. And one of the programs that was most effective in terms of getting medicine into the system quickly and helping communities to retain those kinds of jobs was fiscal relief to the states. Then, and you were both kind of getting at this, then it's absolutely the case that the president has to explain to people who is standing directly between them and a better economy, better opportunities, and more jobs, and that would be the Congress.
I'll be curious to see whether he makes this a campaign against the Congress, meaning you've got to give me back control of the House. Let me show you a commercial. Crossroads GPS is up with this new ad today in battleground states going after the president's economic record.
America's jobless rate is still too high. Barack Obama's got lots of excuses for the bad economy.
Headwinds coming from Europe. We've had a string of bad luck. An earthquake in Japan. An Arab Spring.
An ATM, you don't go to a bank teller.
Some things that we could not control.
You go to the airport and you're using a kiosk.
We've been a little bit lazy, I think, over the last couple of decades.
But Obama never blames Washington's wild spending and skyrocketing debt. Tell Obama for real job growth, cut the debt. Support the New Majority Agenda at newmajorityagenda.org.
Mr. Secretary, react to that spot. There is this narrative that the Republicans, I think, have effectively woven together of all the debt having been incurred on his watch because of his big spending.
Well, first of all, it's factually incorrect. We know that a lot of that debt comes from the Bush tax cut. A lot of it comes from the Medicare drug benefit that created by George W. Bush. And a lot of it comes from cleaning up the mess the Republicans created and Wall Street created. But beyond that, Mitt Romney is in absolutely no position to talk about whittling the debt down when he is advocating a gigantic tax cut for the wealthy that he is not going to even pay for. He hasn't even shown how he was going to close whatever loopholes he said he's going to close. So it's a both dishonest and hypocritical message. I think Democrats ought to be standing up to it and saying that it is dishonest and hypocritical, and blaming Romney for having not a single new idea for bringing jobs back. Not a single idea.
Mr. Bernstein, what I see feeding that narrative, whether it's fact or fiction, we can discuss, but even if it is fiction, is the Supreme Court decision having been upheld constitutionally as a taxing authority of the Congress. I can tell you, I answer the phone for a living. You know, I host a radio program where I hear from people who say, see that? I knew I was going to get whacked with a tax to pay for Obamacare. And largely the people who are calling and asserting that have health insurance and won't be subjected to a penalty.
So, I heard the same thing from a friend of my sister's. Look, at this point, you really need to do an information campaign. And just like Bob was saying, it's not that we should have a discussion about whether it's fact or fiction. It is fiction. I mean, I've crunched the spending numbers myself. And the fact is, and the Congressional Budget Office, nonpartisan, very clear on this point, that this penalty, it's really a freeloader penalty for people who can afford to get insurance but don't, and therefore shove those costs onto the rest of us, is expected to hit 1% of the population. And if you have insurance, it's not going to ding you one bit.
Mr. Secretary, the sales job has been terrible by the White House on that point. I don't deny what Jared Bernstein is saying, but I don't think that the White House has carried the ball in that regard.
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, I think that the White House has basically allowed the individual mandate and the Supreme Court's kind of tax discussion to carry the day. I mean, Mitt Romney was saying that this is not a tax until very recently, and Romney Care in Massachusetts has exactly the same individual mandate. I mean, again, what the White House needs to do, it seems to me, and Democrats, elected Democrats, others need to do, is call it for what it is. I mean, this is about paying your fair share. It's it's about participating in a national health system, you will get it back. If younger and healthier people have got to pay into it, they are going to get it back when they are older and less healthy. I mean, this is all of us in it together, rather than the Republican view of all of us basically separate and apart.
Allow me to show you something that the president said in an interview with the NBC affiliate in Cincinnati. President Obama laid into Mitt Romney for his health care mandate language flip-flop earlier this week. The president questioned Romney's principles.
The fact that a whole bunch of Republicans in Washington suddenly said this is a tax, for 6 years he said it wasn't, and now he's suddenly reversed himself. And so the question becomes, are you doing that because of politics? Are you abandoning a principle that you fought for 6 years simply because you're getting pressure for 2 days?
Jared Bernstein, quick final thought from you on what you just watched.
We are deep into the silly season, my friends. I mean, this is one of the most inane debates we've had so far. Look, if people who don't pay this penalty, people who can afford to get insurance but don't, are placing an implicit tax on the rest of us who have to cover their uncompensated costs. Romney understands this. It was part of his Romney Care, and now it's part of the health care plan. So this is very, very simple, and it shouldn't be nearly as confusing as it's been.
Thank you to Robert
and
Reich,
Michael, with regard to flip-flopping, I mean, Mitt Romney is not just a flip-flopper. I mean, he is a double somersault, triple double dip flip-flopper. I mean, this guy has been all over the map on every single issue, and I think that is an important quality to bring out, to make people understand, and it is an aspect of character.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. Robert Reich, Jared Bernstein as well.
Thank you, Michael.